Okay,
Go ahead and admit folks.
I'm admitting everybody. Here we go.
Perfect.
We'll give a few minutes to let everybody log in and load up into the Zoom call.
You guys hear us?
We can hear you.
We'll give it another minute and get started.
Okay.
Anna, are you with us?
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for taking the time out in your afternoon to listen in on this important topic. Um, I'm Jeff Weinberg. I'm filling in for Mike Glasser today, but I want to start out by welcoming everybody. We've been pretty busy over here on our end. Things keep coming at us. The House Bill 3564 went to a Senate and House vote, and the short of it is it got stalled, but it's not gone. So we're still worried about junk fees and security deposits to be affected on our end. So a lot going on. Um, in any case, as we're getting started, I first want to thank IRS Disposal Services for sponsoring our event today. And Frank Ward with IRS is here, so he's going to provide a few words on his company and what he could offer us.
Hey, kids. I'm Jim Dickens. I'm one of the senior reps here, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I'd like to introduce independent recycling for those that don't know about us. We're a full service, independent waste hauler, family owned and operated since 1976, 50 years. Um, we differentiate ourselves because we are family owned and operated, and I believe that compared to our corporate competitors, we're more accessible. We communicate issues, resolutions to those problems quickly, and provide reliable, dependable services as contracted. And we have 73 trucks, 65 drivers. We are a full service hauler. We have roll off services, porta potties, snow removal, compost, electronics, and we also have a live load service where we could send a garbage truck instead of a roll off, and you wouldn't have to pull a permit. Your crew can load our truck on site same day. And we're third generation now, is coming up to speed. All the kids started out in the container shop. They got their CDLs. They drove trucks. Um, we got, we're a service provider. And if you look at Yelp, we got 6 reviews. And I think that's the best compliment you can get if you're in the service industry and you got 6 reviews on Yelp. People generally aren't writing compliments on a service provider. So we do our job very, very well. And we don't use technology such as, these corporate haulers now installed AI devices on the truck to capture extra yards, pop lids, and they're charging exorbitant fees for these. And it removes the driver out of the equation who can see a box sticking out, nothing else in the can. And these other haulers are charging as if the container was full and has extra yards. So our communication, like I said, if we have a problem, we'll let you know. We'll notify you the problem, and also have a next day pickup scheduled already, pending any instructions from the customer. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Pete Tamlin. Really quick, I work with Jim. Said he knows all about our company. We really enjoy doing the NBOA events, and we experienced some fraud in our industry when we were sending checks to other vendors, or just the safety concerns about remote control openers to different haulers when you're switching companies. But this is great. We're here to listen, and thanks for the opportunity.
I think the great thing about IRS is when you need some service you can make a phone call and somebody will be there to answer your call, and you're not reaching out to a call center chasing someone down. So before I introduce Ari, um, we're facing huge problems. We've always faced problems with application fraud, but today with AI in particular, it's getting easier and easier to just ask the AI machine to give you a pay stub, a W-2, even a rental payment. So we're going to learn some interesting things. Ari Rakic is a director at Westward 360. She's an investor herself. So she knows what's going on in the industry and has lots of stories to tell. So with that, let me turn it over to Ari to kick off the panel discussion.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our NBOA discussion, protecting property owners from fraud. My name is Ari, as he mentioned. I'm a director of new business at Westward 360. My family has owned real estate for over 400 years. Real estate is in my blood, and I would argue that today's environment is one of the most challenging for local landlords and investors. So I'm very grateful to the NBOA for educating and advocating on behalf of our housing community, and Mike Glasser, who's not with us today. At Westward 360, we are working with thousands of owners and boards across Chicago, so we see firsthand how rapidly fraud has evolved and how deeply it impacts property operations. So today we brought together experts that are on the front line to help us understand the scope of the challenges and share practical steps to protect our buildings, clients, and communities. With that, I would like to introduce our panel. Colin Ragland, he is a U.S. Postal Inspector. Anna Popoka, Relationship Officer at Windcrest Bank. And Tyson Schutz, Founder and President of the Apartment Source, and also Brokerage of the Year. So we're excited to have you, and I would love to start out with Colin and have you actually share a little bit more about your background. Your background is very impressive, and then we can go into postal fraud and how it has changed. Colin, are you with us, or did you drop off?
I see Colin, but I'm not able to spotlight him until he has video on.
Okay.
Okay, I should have video on now.
Yes.
Yep, you see me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, my name is Colin Ragland. I'm a postal inspector here in Chicago. Been so for about 11 years now. Prior to that, I was with the U.S. Secret Service, so I protected the president, but on the side, I also did financial crimes, including mail fraud. Prior to that, I was an attorney for the IRS and had my own little business. But so I've dealt with, mail as a customer, and I've dealt with, mail as somebody who investigates it. And Chicago is definitely a hotspot of financial crime. It's like a very trending upwards right now as, drugs is kind of shifting downwards. It seems to be a safer crime. So we have our hands full here. We have a team of about 12 people that works the financial crimes and mail theft aspect within the city of Chicago. So I'm here to answer any questions you have, and I have a little presentation I can put on to hopefully preemptively answer any questions.
All right. Well, let's get into how are criminals defrauding the postal system and what we can do, and feel free to share your presentation at this time.
Sure, it's all verbal. I don't have any PowerPoint or anything like that, but I do have a couple physical things I'll show you. So mainly, the bad guys we're dealing with, they want your money. They want your money or your property. So the offenders I'm primarily dealing with on the north side of the city are offenders that come from places other than the north side, and they will duplicate or steal through an armed robbery or other means our postal arrow key. So this is a serialized accountable key that carriers carry, the mindset being one key buzzes them into every building within the city of Chicago. That obviates the need to carry 90 keys because they touch on average 90 addresses a day. So we have the key to the city essentially. And unfortunately, that's fallen into the wrong hands in the past 5 or 6 years through armed robberies, through offenders actually using Dremels and templates and cutting the same key with the exact same teeth profile. And even other ways they're doing it is they're cutting out our arrow locks out of the call boxes and then reverse engineering them to, be able to be, this works just as smoothly as my arrow key works. So the bad guys make the arrow key or they steal the arrow key. They go to a building, a multi-unit building, because that's a great hunting ground for mail and identity information. They buzz themselves in the call box. Or another way they get in is they use there's a key keeper sometimes on the outside of buildings. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. It's just a box with an arrow lock that the carrier would use. He or she would open it and there'd be a key to the building in there. Well, the bad guys now have access to that because they have one of our arrow keys. So they get into the building using the arrow key. Once they're in the building, my main concern is your safety, but it's also the mail. That same arrow key drops the multi-panel boxes down and they're able to just steal the mail. I'm sure many of you have reviewed video from your buildings having the mail stolen. So essentially, now they have documents that help them steal identities, or they have checks, or they have cash, or they have bank books, anything that comes through the mail. They also steal, I've arrested several that were going in there and stealing, electric bikes, regular bikes, strollers. Some of them times they get into the garages and steal the cars. So they're using the postal key, and sometimes they're not even touching the mail. They're going for bigger ticket items, power tools, anything that they can get their hands on. It's gang driven and it's drug addiction driven, essentially. Ways we're mitigating it. So I talk to a lot of business owners, multi-unit property owners, and this is a great way right now for me to get out in front of a whole bunch. Ways that have worked in the past, building owners, condo associations have disconnected the arrow lock that is located inside of the call box. It's a low voltage hot wire and then a ground wire, a green and a black. They open the call box. I can't do it because I don't have access to your call box. But then they take the wires off, they put a little black tape over it, and then it's disconnected. Well, now the bad guys can't get in. They'll go hunting elsewhere. The carrier also can't get in. So that's where it's incumbent on the property owner or the management to provide a new means of entry to the local post office, the zip code that operates where the building is located, the address is located. So you go to the post office, you ask for the supervisor if it's in the AM hours, the manager if it's in the PM hours, and you say, we've had some security concerns. This has now been disconnected, the arrow lock. Please use this unique PIN assigned to the Postal Service to get in, or use this fob. They prefer a PIN number, 4 or 6 digit, because they can program it directly into their scanning tool that they use for notifying of package deliveries, and it'll come up for that address. So even when their weekend coverage is working, that weekend coverage who doesn't work that route every day and is not familiar with it can just look at the scanner that only they can unlock and see, oh, here's the PIN number for 5237 West Montrose. Boom. So now they're in. That's one way the building management can secure the building better. I also always recommend door sill guards, the full, 6-footers that cover the whole sill. So there can be no pry tools or any type of jimmying to open the doors, because we have seen pry tool burglars break in and they are really good at their craft. If you do encounter, your tenants complaining about mail theft, contact me directly. I'll leave my email at the conclusion of this. Reach out. You're going to have to provide me video because we're in Cook County. If there's no video, there's no crime. You're going to have to make a police report with the city of Chicago, because if I don't get federal charges, then I have to go with the state charges and there has to be a police report. The good news is we've gotten up to 9 years behind bars for these repeat burglars that keep using the key to get into buildings. So that's a win, because they're still going to serve 4.5 even here in this climate. So I need the video, I need the police report number, and I honestly recognize a lot of the people we see on video every day. I'm waiting on video right now, and I asked the guy who's sending it to me, describe the person to me, what are they wearing, and I instantly, a name popped into my head, and I'm probably not wrong. So we'll see when the video gets here. I would tell your tenants not to try to stop these bad guys. I have seen people get physically battered by them, and we've caught them for that. But it doesn't matter. The battery's already over. It's happened. Individual tenants. We share something called Protecting Your Mail, which I can share with your organization. Basically, it has a lot of keys that I think are helpful that I've never even thought of. Number one, get your mail every night. Get it the moment you get home from work, because if the bad guys hunting the mail aren't getting anything when they're taking that chance and breaking into that building, they're going to quit going. They go to the hot spots that have the most boxes that are, the boxes are tucked away and there's no doorman and there's the most mail in them. So if everyone's getting their mail every night, and if your neighbors are going on vacation and they trust you, get their key and get their mail for them. Just don't leave any mail in those boxes overnight when these, typical night crawlers typically strike. I would say, have the parcels left around the corner so they're not visible to a bad guy who's, walking around at 1 a.m. looking in the windows to see if there's a big stack of parcels. Sign up for informed delivery. It's free. You just you get online, you sign up through the Postal Service, informed delivery. You get a snapshot email of everything that's been that's coming to your mailbox. Like this morning at 6 a.m. I got mine and I saw everything that's coming in the mail. And it's nothing important today, but yesterday there was some important stuff. And not only does that show you what you're getting, if you don't get everything that's in that scan email, then you can report that immediately through the email. And secondly, we are seeing a trend of the bad guys signing up for your informed delivery. If you've not already staked your claim to it, only one person can stake a claim to it. So husband and wife, husband, only one person can sign up for it for a household, and businesses are not yet able to sign up for it. But don't let somebody else stake their claim on your informed delivery so they see what's coming to your mailbox. We had a big problem with blue boxes being broken into because same key, but we've changed those keys. We're updating everything with new technology that I can't go too deep into, but just think, computer chips and Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, I should say. And if a key gets stolen now, we can basically shut the key off, so it's no longer going to work with any lock. That will be rolling out to individual buildings at some point, but right now it was more beneficial for us to secure the blue boxes, which we're just getting cleaned out pretty routinely. So yeah, fire away with any questions. As more stuff comes to mind, I'll share.
Can you just mention a little bit about Butterfly MX and similar systems? Like, do you see that as a good replacement for keys, and what your experience is with those?
Absolutely. Yeah, technology is great. The bad guys do find workarounds, and I'll speak to that. But yeah, the Butterfly without the actual postal key hole to, buzz the carrier in is a good thing. Absolutely. A PIN that's accountable only to the post office, only turned on between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. is fantastic. The carriers we've in my experience in the 11 years I've been here do not share the PIN numbers. We don't see unauthorized entries or at strange times. If a carrier is a bad guy themselves, carriers have been known to steal mail, and we go after them just as much. But they don't steal it out of your box. It's stolen somewhere in the mail stream well ahead of delivery. So we never see the abuse of a PIN given to a carrier. That has not been my experience, and I'll ask some of my coworkers that are here if they've experienced that. But we share, and that thus far has not been. Unfortunately, with Butterfly and some of the other systems, there are like maintenance codes that are kind of like almost like a default code or administrator codes, and we've watched video where the bad guy, who we know who he is, and he doesn't live near this building, goes up and punches a code in, then punches another code in, and all of a sudden he's buzzed in. And the building owner is trying to figure out, how did he get in? Does he know somebody? Was he calling somebody inside the building, and the person didn't know him but still let him in? No, the administration code was still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's all over the internet. So if you have a Butterfly system, I can't tell you how to do it, but make sure that you've cleaned out every code and you don't have some like FedEx generic 1111 code in there or anything like that. Make sure every code is intentional.
Okay, love it. Kara, I know you have a question. Feel free to ask at this time, but all the questions should be in the chat and then we can review at the end of the meeting. But go ahead and ask what you had intended. You there?
Okay, I'm here. So my question, I'm a property manager, mostly in the Lakeview area. And every time I've gone to the police station at Addison, every time, and I'm telling you, this is probably 6 or 7 times, they tell me, unless the property was damaged, like our entry to the door, but if it's only they access the panels for the post office, the mailboxes, that I must file a report with the U.S. Postal Police, and I can let the post office know on Irving, but they can't file a police report. I got pushback again and again and again on this. Can you please advise what language I need to give them to make those police reports happen?
Yep. So the people that are the gatekeepers at 311 and maybe the people sitting at the desk are not the people that maybe should be cops. Like they don't want to go. It's actually your right to document through a police report. So they actually can't tell you no. They just think they can, or they're hoping you'll go away. This is we had the same pushback, and I grabbed a detective friend of mine from the 19th district, and we went out and we made 14 police reports in one day that were where pushback was being done. So you go in and you say, we had a burglary at our building. They used burglar tools to get the door open, and then they went in, they stole stuff, including mail. But they're not just stealing mail, they're stealing UPS, FedEx, whatever's sitting on the ground that's a box. That's not mail. So that's one way of getting around it was just mail stolen. Just say, but another problem is if a property owner or management company makes the report at the city level, it's only a trespass to property. If a individual whose box was opened makes a report, it's a felony burglary. So I always stress I need a good victim from the building that's not the building owner, because the building owner, yes, they're victimized, but in more abstract way, like my tenants feel unsafe, therefore they may not re-sign with me, but nothing was stolen unless, the maintenance power tools were all stolen. Then that's something you guys could bring up as a burglary. But just a simple entry, the crime against the property owner is a criminal trespass, and I think it's a misdemeanor. But if the mailboxes are open or something is taken from somebody who actually domiciles there, that becomes a burglary, because that's part of the language in the burglary statute at the state level. I'm sorry you encountered that. I can't, me nor my detective friends who I make a lot of arrests with, cannot make an arrest unless there's a police report made. And it drives me nuts that the online reporting is almost useless. And when you call 311, you get the most unhelpful person that just wants to tell you no. And going into a police station, I would have thought that was the way to go. And I feel terrible that it didn't work out for you. But a lot of times, if you got a hold of me directly and you put me in contact with a victim, I would just call one of my detective friends and we would show up at his or her door and make the report.
One more question about the PIN. You said if we could provide a PIN. What do we do when the U.S. Postal Service or the local branch manager will not take a code?
So I have not encountered that happening lately. In the past, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when we were trying to provide them new keys, they were pushing back, hey, I don't want my carrier carrying 37 keys. This is getting ridiculous. But we've had some significant, in fact, I had one case where we took it federal. The guy was breaking into a building at 8 a.m. and he ended up beating up this guy who was just walking his son to school. When the condo owner said, sir, I don't recognize you as a neighbor. Why are you in my mailbox? And the bad guy hurt him really bad. So now I say, we're having, I tell people like yourself, we're having massive security breaches at my building. And it's known, all the bad guys, if they want an arrow key, they have one. I mean, I have a whole bag of arrow keys here that I got out of one residence. They mass produce them. So they're not giving a lot of pushback these days, and especially with the pins, because we just started educating the managers around town that all you gotta do is enter, your every address is in that scanner. You just put it under hazard in the scanner and you put the pin in there, and then it pops up when you get to that address. And it doesn't matter who the carrier is, whoever's holding that route scanner, when they get near that address, they have the code to get in. So, and plus these carriers, they don't want to carry the arrow key anymore because they got 5 people rolling 5 deep, rolling up on them with Glocks, jumping out of the car to steal it. So the less keys they have on them, the better. But if you get pushback, reach out to me direct. I'll give you my email address. I'll make sure you get your code to the proper person.
Thank you.
All right, we really appreciate that. Was incredibly helpful. Let's move on to Anna Popoka from Wintrust, and then we can catch up with Colin. I'm sure many of us will have questions and we'll be reaching out. But Anna, let's discuss what you're seeing and what trends you're experiencing tied to real estate payments and transactions.
Okay, thank you so much for having us in the first place. If you notice, I have next to me Nick Maddy. He's also going to be sharing some pointers in regards to his side of his duties. Okay, so I want to ask Nick to speak first, and then I'll speak. I'll do my presentation real quick, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so Nick.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Nick Matei. I'm the small business lender here at Wintrust Bank in Rogers Park. I oversee the Rogers Park, the Loyola, and the North Center branches. I've been in this current role, for about 6 months. Before that, I was with Wintrust for the past 3 years as a commercial analyst. So I have a ton of experience in the business banking realm. And today, I just wanted to talk about a few of the most common types of fraud that we've been seeing, and then kind of how we can mitigate those types of fraud. So I guess just to start, the easiest way to start is, what is business fraud? Fraud is obviously deceptive or illegal activities used to cause financial or reputational harm to a business. The first example of fraud that we see the most is obviously going to be internally. So it's going to be employee fraud. The most common example of employee fraud would be embezzlement. So this would be the fraudulent misappropriation of assets by someone who's been entrusted with them. This could be anything from a cashier pocketing money from a register to a payroll manager creating fake employee accounts or other accounts to divert paychecks to their own personal account. We also see kickbacks. So this is when a business offers or receives something of value, which is usually a bribe or a commission, and that's to gain favorable treatment in a transaction. And then we also have falsification of records. This has largely been not really as prevalent in recent times. It used to be a lot more before technology kind of took over, but still the falsification of records is still the act of intentionally altering, creating, or destroying with the intent to defraud or deceive a business, which is still very much possible if you have an accountant who is an honest accountant or a bookkeeper who is looking to deceive your business, to defraud your business. We also see vendor fraud. Vendor fraud are schemes in which employees or third parties deceive a business to obtain unauthorized payments or benefits. The most common type of vendor fraud is going to be inflated or fake invoices. So even if it's a real invoice, they may inflate the actual price or the value of the invoice. They'll satisfy the actual amount and then they'll pocket the change. Unordered purchases as well, and kickbacks are also a topic of discussion with vendor fraud. Some vendor fraud examples, obviously the phony invoice, accounts payable invoices, accounts receivable invoices can all be fake. They can all be deceived. So the best recommendation I have is being aware of each invoice that comes through. And a lot of businesses have a ton of invoices every day. A lot of the times the scammer will kind of get a list of all the invoices from the business, and they'll actually target the ones that are coming through the most, because when those invoices are coming through the most, that's when a bank or that's when a business is not actually looking into it as much. They think we trust this vendor. We've had relations with them for a while. They make the same invoice every day at this time for this amount. And they'll just come in with a fake invoice or where they edit the address maybe, or they'll do something in the name where it's slightly different from the actual business name, and that's how a lot of businesses are defrauded in that way. They also do unordered merchandise scams. So they may call you and they want you to confirm your address to give you a free sample of whatever they've been selling. This is a big red flag. You never confirm your address for a free sample or whatever request they may be if you haven't had any previous communication with them, or if you haven't made any orders, especially. We know that can get kind of hard, obviously, with high volume of orders for businesses. Sometimes unordered merchandise will arrive at the business and they'll demand you pay immediately. Obviously we would hope that you look into what the package is and look if you even ordered it in the first place. Unfortunately, some businesses don't do that, and they may feel pressured by their demands, and they give, whether it's their address or payment information, and the second they get a hold of that information, you're at risk of fraud. So try to stay away from confirming addresses for odd requests or for orders that you didn't order, or merchandise that you didn't order. And then the most common form of vendor fraud that we're seeing personally at the bank would be tech support scams. And these are very hard to detect. It's usually through a pop-up or a phone call where a scammer claims to be tech support, especially with the bank. We know we've actually had experience with scammers who will call the Wintrust or whatever bank it is. They'll call their IT team and they'll actually study the mannerisms and what they ask for and the details that they look for. And they'll essentially play a copycat of the IT team, and they'll play very well. And they've got it set up to where they have the number will come up as the actual Wintrust IT number. It'll show up as Wintrust IT, and they'll essentially copycat the role of a Wintrust IT support person, and they will have the script spot on because they obviously made the call to Wintrust IT first, so they already know what they're asking for. This is why the best thing that we can tell you as a banker is have your banker's personal information, and do not even interact with a bank's IT team. Your banker should be able to do that. Anything internally within the bank, your banker should have the connection to that. So only go through the banker that the banker that you have experience with, because the scammers are very skillful. They know what they're doing, and they have a great system that really allows them to manipulate information. And the best thing to do is just to double check with your personal banker and make sure that they're aware of the request that's coming through, especially if it's coming from an internal request with the bank. Hackers obviously are another thing. It's very hard to stop on our end. But again, keeping your information confidential, not putting passwords in emails, not putting any other addresses in emails as much as you can. Obviously, we know there's certain circumstances where that's required, but essentially, specifically passwords need to be confidential at all times. If you can, do it through a phone call. But that's the most common type that we're seeing is the tech support scams, because those are very hard to detect and they're very hard to bypass, and they do a very good job of scamming them that way. Business email compromises, obviously, this is cyber crimes in which criminals impersonate a trusted or important person. Biggest thing is just checking the email address. A lot of times they'll use the exact same name and they'll put a 1 or they'll put a symbol in it, and so it'll look just like the email you've been seeing from your boss or from someone else. But it'll just be a slight variation, and a lot of people will fall for that. It's a phishing scam. A lot of times it's a request to change ACH info or a change of address, or intercepting wire instructions. But either way, just confirm the email is from who you're actually getting it from, because that's another thing is they'll just make a small little difference in the email, and that'll really catch on to some people.
Okay. Could you expand on what you recommend specifically for owners and managers, as far as, multi-factor authentication and dual buyer approvals? And could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll pick up on that as well, because some of the stuff that Nick brought up, I was going to also talk about. When it comes to fraud, it's very important that whoever is handling the transaction, they know what they're doing. They have some kind of training. Like, for example, the technology, emails, texts, phone calls, and they already have some of the information, and it will be practical to confirm whatever you're receiving, whether you're receiving instructions from one of those technologies. Confirm. Call the bank. If you think it's coming from the bank, call the bank and talk to a banker. Okay? When it comes to personal information, we do not give that up. And we do not even confirm over the phone, because the person that I may be talking to, it could be the fraudster, and he already did his homework. Okay, they have a great technology. They have a great ways of finding out a lot of things about. In your case, will be your tenants. Your tenants also, as the consumer, they need to do their due diligence as well. Not to provide. This might be something on your end. You could maybe pass out some kind of letter informing anything dealing with ABC. Please contact so and so. Okay, we need to kind of that's what I do when I open accounts. I train a little bit the customers, because in our end has been the ACHs, external transfers, checks. They alter checks, and in a inexperienced person looks at the check, it looks legit, they're going to deposit that check, or they're going to give it to you as rent. And they know the system, they know how to manipulate the days, they even know the regulation, the days that it will take for a check to clear. And then by the time they give you the check, you process it through your bank, they come to my bank, they pull the money out. So when that item comes back, there's no funds. So you guys as the landlords, you're out of the money. So the external transfer has been lately with myself here at Rogers Park. There was a time that they were doing transfers from one bank to us here at Wintrust. They will come in the same day because it shows on our end pending. Okay, so they take their money out, they make a cashier's check, and they're gone. Now, if they have given you rental money for that money, you're out of the money as well. Because when your item comes in to be paid, there's no money in the account. Okay, this like I mentioned, a little education regarding finances in regards to the bank account and how they deal with you, and how you set up some kind of a system that will help your tenant and you as well. We also have the email that he brought up. Here at Winters, when we receive an email for anything, we call back and we use the system information. That's another thing on your end. When they fill out your tenant application, the lease, see if you could verify those phone numbers. You could Google anything nowadays. Okay, when they leave, call the number, see if they answer, or if they don't answer. If they don't answer, something is wrong there. The address, the postal office, as the gentleman before was speaking about, confirm the address that they give you. You could confirm, okay, where did you live before? When it comes to transfer money or Zelle money, you are okay to say to the tenant, I need to see a statement. And then they said, well, why you need to do that? To show that you have the money and there was a transfer. So you see the balance and you see in the activity of the account, the actual dollar amount that is being given to you. If they give you stories, red flag. Okay. Here we do with a standard transfer. We're practicing exactly that, especially with large amounts. And so, well, and believe it or not, we've heard this. I need to pay my rent. I'm running late on my rent. They said, I'm sorry. You bring us the statement from the other bank, and we could see that the money was there and it was transferred to us here. Then maybe we could release the funds or some of the funds. But we usually ask the customer to come back the next day when it's a pending item. Okay, to save not only them, but us and the other bank from being scammed, because they're very savvy. On the Zelle is the same thing. Just because you got it, you think it's in your account, you think it's available. No, I would wait about a day, because by then the bank has verified that those funds were actually legit to be paid out. Okay. Let me see. Any questions that you may have in the
I
meantime?
think that's good, Anna. Let's kind of keep things moving. And then if anyone has questions, please put them in the chat. We really appreciate this excellent insight. And let's talk about credit, background checks, and fraud that way. Tyson Schutz, you're up next. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background as well?
Hey everybody, appreciate y'all having me here today. I'm Tyson Schutz. I'm the managing broker and president of the Apartment Source. Let me just see if can you guys all see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So I've been in the industry about 15 years. I started as a leasing agent at the old Apartment Source on Halsted in 2011. Within a couple of years of that, I was the manager and processing every application the Apartment Source received on behalf of private landlords myself. So I back then we were doing things very manually with credit checks, and fraud was nowhere near as sophisticated. So I think we would all agree things have changed dramatically. But just briefly about my company, the Apartment Source is a third-party leasing solution. We service over 300 private landlords in the city of Chicago and a handful of the developers and a large portion of the downtown high-rise market. So how we encounter fraud is usually from renter applications. My processing team is processing roughly 6,000, 6,500 or so of these a year. We do around 3,000 transactions a year. So I think, there's something to be said for just their experience and the kinds of fraud that they're encountering. But we're seeing this happen around once a week right now, on average. And some weeks there's 10 or 20 cases of fraud. It really just depends on what we're renting and what's going on in the market. But briefly, from a bird's eye view, a couple of quick points. The NMHC conducted a study in 2024 where 93% of the respondents experienced some kind of fraud in the last 12 months. 85% of those respondents saw falsified income and employment documents, a lot of what Nick and Anna are telling us about that they see at the bank. And a quarter of evictions were usually due to fraudulent documents in the first place. So in my eyes, that's something with a really good fraud prevention plan you could mitigate and you could prevent. But unfortunately, only 17% of companies surveyed by this RealPage survey have a portfolio-wide fraud prevention plan. In this other study that RealPage did, over half of the property owners reported property damage from their fraudulent occupants, and over half reported poor reviews or reputational harm. And I can speak for myself. There's nothing worse than like getting a negative review from someone who's mostly just upset that they're being evicted and were fraudulent in the first place. It's not an authentic, opinion, but unfortunately, it's valued the same way online. 48% of respondents reported that fraud caused evictions and additional costs. And 42% said that fraud drives away good residents. If you have a fraudulent person in one of your multifamily properties, it's most likely that they're nefarious by nature and potentially causing other issues amongst the tenants, noise and whatever else. These stolen packages, I'm sure, are some of the same folks who are fabricating documents. Let me just move this. Oh, yeah. And just briefly, this last stat, 73% detected fraud after move-in. They're really just not catching this soon enough. So very briefly, my processing department encounters 4 types of document fraud. There's AI-generated, first-party, template-based, and just misused documents. I'm just going to go into these very quickly with examples. This is ChatGPT. I'm sure most of you on this call have encountered AI of some kind. This is one of the more popular ones, but you could simply put in a request to create an ADP pay stub, which is one of the common payroll companies, for a fake person with a fake salary, and it generates it within 6 seconds with like excellent accuracy at this point. We were conducting these tests at the beginning of the year when we revised our internal process. And since then, ChatGPT has released some more boundaries on creating fake stubs, but it's still shockingly easy to create those. The more classic version of fraud is just someone altering the documents themselves. You see this a lot with people just changing, the amount of earnings they make on a pay stub, or just using a fake ID is another real common one we see, or using a real ID that's not the subject, the applicant themselves. This one was shocking to me. You can buy a template. There are literal public websites online. I don't know how this is legal, but there's websites online that you can go to pay $5, $10, $20 to, and you input some information and they'll create the pay stub for you. I'm sure they're claiming it's for educational purposes. I can't really think of a great use case for something like that, but not to put them on blast, here's one of the companies that's offering this to the general public right now. This is just a Wall Street Journal article I saw last week that I think it was over half of rental applications in Atlanta contained fraudulent information. And one of the examples this article cites, which is another just mind-blowing thing, is that people are all over TikTok advertising the service of creating fabricated documents for residents right now. There's literally social media influencers who are solving the problem for fraudsters to get into high-end apartments that they wouldn't otherwise afford, right? And then finally, the most benign form of fraud that we encounter is just misuse of documents. You'd be surprised how many folks are using like their Venmo transaction history as a reflection of their income or something. And it's just really not a genuine look at the income that someone's making. So what do? We fight fire with fire. At my business, we're utilizing AI to detect a lot of this stuff in all 5 stages of our application process. At the very beginning, the very first thing we do is verify that the identification we're provided is authentic. I'm sure a lot of you who've been through the airports are familiar with this company, Clear. There's a handful of other third-party services that require a tenant to upload or take a picture of themselves, and it'll use biometric or facial recognition software to match that real-time photo with what's on the ID to make sure it's the right person. I want to say 20% of our fraud is caught right there with fake IDs. Second step is with the credit check. This is, one of the very few things we still have left in terms of a resource as landlords. I didn't mention I'm a landlord myself, so I do approach a lot of this from the landlord's perspective. But yeah, the credit check also will provide you address and identity information. And sometimes it just doesn't pass the smell check if there's like multiple addresses from multiple different states or multiple names that result on the credit report. And it just something just kind of feels funny sometimes when you see that on the credit report and will cause for concern to look deeper. The most sophisticated and I think quickly evolving part of our internal process is the income verification. Because so many people are using AI to generate false documents that are pretty much indiscernible by the human eye, we have to utilize third-party AI services to detect these edits and modifications. And it begs the question of how these companies are able to tell if you can't tell from the human eye. While AI they're looking at the metadata within the document. They're opening up essentially the source code of the document and looking for changes and modifications and anomalies within the source code. It's not something I could teach myself to do. There's a handful of third-party services that do this, but it'll point out to you, what parts of the document were modified, and it's almost always, the income or the identification. Finally, one of the other things that we do is just a simple tenancy verification. Has this person rented before in the city of Chicago or somewhere? And can we speak to their landlord as a reference? Often you'll be able to find that address online and prior old listings to ensure that it was a rental property. And, it's just a vibe check. You're just hopefully getting contact with their current landlord to make sure that this person is who they say they are. I realize people use fake names and numbers for some of these references, but again, you can kind of tell sometimes if someone picks up the phone if they're not a real property owner. So assuming, that the applicant passes these 4 stages of application processing, our final step is to triangulate their identification. Anyone on this call who's used like Robinhood or Venmo or any investment platform, or I think some of the like sports betting platforms, they want to verify your bank funds or connect to your bank using a third party. I think one of the popular ones is called Plaid, but there's a handful of other ones. And what these third parties do is they take the identification, they look at your bank account and your pay stub, and they verify that all three have the same information, that it's consistent. So, there are times where we miss the income being modified or the ID being fake. And at this stage where it cross triangulates, the identification with the bank statements will catch it. Like I said, Plaid's a good platform for that. PayScore is another one we use. I know a lot of AppFolio users also supplement AppFolio with PayScore. And these are just companies that provide that triangulation. At this point in the process, you're pretty much providing an approval based on credit and income if it's a qualified person, and you have one last ditch effort to assess the quality of the applicant, and that's a criminal background check. Since the Just Housing Ordinance was passed, we can't check criminal background in the initial stages of the application process without a preliminary approval, but you are still entitled to run the criminal background check if you're providing preliminary approval based on the credit and income. So I do recommend you still do that. And then we use CoreLogic. They have a product called Resident Screening for both the credit and the criminal background check. Finally, the only other fraud that we experience that's not document fraud, it's not someone modifying or faking, their application, is occupancy fraud. We're seeing a lot of people that are getting qualified for the place and then either subletting it in an unauthorized way for Airbnb, or just like, they have multiple addresses under their name that they're using arbitrage to earn income on. Really, the only way to prevent this is to do site visits. And I encourage any of the self-operating landlords on this call to visit their properties at least once or twice a year and do an inspection. You need to know who's living and what the condition of your place is, obviously. And then also just Googling, your address and seeing if there's any listings online for it in the middle of your lease. Once or twice a year, I'll just check all my addresses to make sure there's no bogus ads up, because we have been victims of phishing in the past. Forewarn is another great platform my agents use at the initial step. It's not for screening applicants or applications, to be clear, but the Chicago Association of Realtors offers a membership to this platform to all the brokers and agents like myself, so that we can kind of pre-screen who we're meeting at the showing stage. And I'm sure a lot of the agents who are using this are preventing potential application fraud by just never meeting unsavory or people with not good backgrounds on forewarn. It's kind of a preliminary criminal background check before you ever even get an application. But if y'all want to screenshot, these are a handful of the resources that I mentioned during this call. We use probably 60% of these, but the others are just viable competitors. And feel free to let me know. We're experimenting a lot with resistant AI right now. It's doing a great job. It's one of the more affordable ones, and Snapped. And if you ask me, by February or March, who we have better experience with, I'd be happy to share.
Tyson,
Appreciate the time.
yeah, absolutely. For smaller landlords, could you sort of give us your pet peeve as far as, obviously they're not going to have the bigger platforms available to them. What would you recommend?
Yeah, so I think, you need to have a process for how you're screening your applications. At the very least, a credit check through resident screening or one of the competitors. The problem with all this is it's very expensive, right? And with the new legislation that may or may not be getting passed in January, we may only be able to charge $50 for an application. If you use all the platforms I just, recommended, your cost of the application is over $50. And as fraud becomes more sophisticated, we need sophisticated tools to fight it. So, what should a small landlord do? I'd say bank on the credit check. Bank on if you're gonna hire a third party, use AI to detect income verification fraud. Those pay stubs are such a big portion of this. If you don't have like the biometric checking the ID platform, it's a little less important, because that's usually identity fraud is going to come up on the credit check or just not pass the smell check with everything else that we're doing. But yeah, I'd say if there was one thing to recommend, it's to utilize AI for income verification.
Great takeaways. Really appreciate everything. Again, I would love to bring everyone together for a roundtable discussion and answer some of the questions that are in the chat as well. The first question I can see is from Jacqueline. When fraud is suspected in a rental application such as falsified pay stubs, altered payments app transactions, or manipulated credit documents, who should housing providers report this to, and what immediate steps should we take to preserve evidence or protect ourselves? Additionally, are there any legal repercussions or formal actions that can be pursued?
That's a great question. I love that question. To be totally frank, I don't think that we report this to anybody. We just reject. We provide a formal rejection because there are so many protections in this city for tenants and applicants. We don't get into the hairy business of taking it a step further. If someone does have a good solution for that, though, I'd love to implement it in my business.
Colin, do you have any feedback on this?
I'm sorry, I was in a side meeting. What was the question?
It's a long question. Tyson, you want to repeat it?
Yeah, so I think they just want to know who we should report to if we encounter fraud, who are the right parties to enforce, the law here, if anyone.
So if the fraud can be tied to a mailing, whether a mailing received or a mailing induced, a bad guy mailing to you or you being induced to mail something back, and the loss amount is great enough, we would gladly take it with the potential of getting it charged federally. And a lot of times, we've had good luck with mortgage fraud, the frauds that you're speaking of where it's rental. We've worked those and it's led to other types of fraud being uncovered with the same culpable party. So we have had good luck with those. I personally have had good luck. So always feel free to reach out to us and we'll fit, a square peg into a round hole if need be. As long as we can somehow articulate it touches the mail in some way, we've met our initial requirement to jacket a case and get moving on it.
All right. Dante had a question. Is the use of electronic PIN access by USPS optional? Can specific post officers opt out and refuse to use the PIN and demand a key?
Yes, unfortunately, these managers and supervisors can, at the individual post offices, they have their own little kingdom, so to speak, and they can say, no, we don't want to use that. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot of sway over the Postal Service. I'm with the Postal Inspection Service, and a separate agency oversees the Postal Service, which is the Office of Inspector General. I have a little sway on a personal level with a lot of these managers up in the areas in the north side of the city. So I'd be more than happy to go have a conversation and, make it happen. But it's all in the delivery sometimes. If you say we've had a very bad security issue, we had, drug users breaking into the building, which it's the truth. And we need to shut this arrow lockdown, which we've already done. Now, here's your new way to get in. If they say no, me personally, I'd say, may I have your name for when something horrible happens? I want to say who told me no. But also, I'd also be happy to help.
Okay. That brings us, Fuad asked, are we allowed to put some type of smart lock device on mailboxes that is only active outside of carrier delivery hours?
Absolutely. There are different timers. I can't speak to any in particular. I know some locksmiths can give you some great ideas, but there's some timers out there that you can set yourself. You can set them remotely, and it'll only allow the carrier in during certain times. And, it's been my experience a few years back when I was overseeing some of these installations and facilitating it, they were about $500 installed.
Why can't we go after applicants for fraud, or can we? I feel like we answered that to some extent, but Colin, that might be a question for you.
So it depends on the level. Being a federal agent, I can work cases that I'm asked to join at the state level, like the Chicago police ask me to join cases often because we have a lot of resources being the feds. But something like a fraud, it's going to have to get it through the door of the U.S. Attorney's Office. They have a blanket declination where they say, don't bring it to us unless it's over $300,000 provable, which $300,000 provable, like already proved up without using grand jury subpoenas and all that. It's kind of a high bar to reach because it might mean like 900,000 because they'll whack 600,000 off almost immediately as not being provable. So it's all driven by the actual loss that can be proved up. Like a couple of my cases were in the teens and 20s of millions, and I felt like I was even clawing at trying to get it prosecuted at the federal level. So it's all about number of victims, any extenuating circumstances like the victims being elderly, and the actual loss amount, not intended loss amount. Not they wrote $1 million check and they got $5,000 out of the bank before it was shut down, because that's not actual loss. So it's all about just the money amount is what they throw their resources at.
Okay, and Kara asked, what do we do when Social Security number was issued after 2011, and how do we verify this is an actual applicant's Social Security number?
Can I jump in really quick to say that we've had this happen, and it comes up on the Equifax credit report. It comes up as a red flag that this Social Security number has been issued after 2011, and it says to basically like double check it or make sure it's correct. What are we supposed to do outside of running it through Equifax to make sure that is valid, besides taking a look at it with your naked eye and hoping you're right?
I cannot help answer that question.
Tyson, any feedback?
Yeah, well, one of those platforms, I'm trying to look up which one it was, is actually owned by Equifax, one of the AI platforms. So they have like an additional layer of checks. They have, they go one level deeper. I think it's called Count with a K. You could look into to using that. Someone else asked what the pricing is like for these. It really varies. It's one of the platforms I mentioned is around $2,000 a month, just a flat fee. Another one is like $18, $19 per document. So if you're more low volume, maybe you pay by the document.
Okay, some of the questions will be in Tyson's presentation, and you feel free to reach out to him, and he can perhaps email you some of the content that he has on his slideshow. What else? Roman, the challenge we're having with tenants who provide their own credit report. How do we know if the credit report has been altered? Are we allowed to rerun? I think we somewhat covered that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Roman. I think a lot of landlords are kind of worried about sidestepping the new law that was just passed. You do have to accept a credit report provided from a client, but only in the capacity to which they do not have to pay for your credit report. You're still entitled to run your own credit report. And to be clear, I'm not a lawyer, but this is my understanding of the whole thing. You're still entitled to run a credit report, but at your own cost. You do have to accept theirs. It's basically a way for them to waive paying for the additional credit report. But to detect the fraud on the credit report, it's just getting too hard for the naked eye. I highly suggest everybody implement AI for that, because it looks into the metadata. And I'm sorry, Ari, I don't mean to overstep, but Remele asked a very related question. What's a good prompt to use with AI to verify that? ChatGPT, if you attempt to ask it to look into the metadata of a document, which is again like the source code of the document, essentially, it can't do that unless you provide it the metadata. I don't personally know how to do that, which is why we pay a third party company to issue the metadata and inspect the metadata. So I don't know if there's a prompt that's really going to be able to look in the depth that you need without hiring a third party yet, as far as I know.
Okay. So for everyone here, as as fraud becomes more sophisticated each year, where do you see the biggest gaps in awareness amongst property professionals? Tyson, you want to
Yeah,
start?
I'd just say in the sophistication here. I think a lot of people are using real IDs and it's not them. If you aren't triangulating the ID with direct access to their bank account, you really can't catch that, right? Or like I said, some of these other platforms force you to take a picture of yourself and matches it to the ID, and it knows if that's a new picture or not. It's getting really difficult, and I think, we need to rely on technology at this point because I advocate for my processing department. I think they've seen more applications than the average person in the city of Chicago, certainly, but we still miss stuff. It's just getting too hard.
Colin, anything to add?
Mine's a lot more low level. It's, the fraud all starts with a mail theft, right? So I just go back to saying, try and get your mail every single night. Know what's coming your way by using informed delivery. Have, the management best secure the buildings. We're getting out there installing these new locks. The bad guys will find a new way to steal mail. They might go back to breaking into trucks like they used to do before they learned about this key. Yeah, and I always say, for my Secret Service days, like definitely, watch your credit history. Just watch, scrutinize everything. Don't just rely on some, credit monitoring agency to do it because that things can be missed. I've seen that firsthand. So yeah, they used to steal ComEd bills because ComEd bills had like Social Security numbers, I believe. I'm not from Illinois and I don't pay a ComEd bill, but that just floored me that was still sent through the mail as recently as 2020. So I guess be careful what you put in the mail. Be careful what you have sent to you in the mail.
Nick and Anna, do you have anything to add? All right. If any of you have a couple comments, feel free. We have a couple minutes left, so now is a good time to bring up anything that you feel is important to the conversation. All of our guests included. Jeff, you had a question earlier. You're unmute.
Yep, I got you. Yeah, I was just curious. This is for Tyson. You go through the 5 steps and then you do the criminal check. I'm just curious how often, after you've gone through all of the other steps and everything has been good, checked out, you've triangulated, it's good, and then you get to the criminal. How often does it fail at the criminal level?
At this point, it's less often. We were leaning on the criminal background check a lot more, like as recently as last year. But if you're doing everything else in the front end of the screening process and using AI and using platforms like Plaid to verify the bank, you're catching, fraudulent people sooner than the criminal background check. We do see like reformed criminals, and you obviously, I don't, or maybe not obviously, but for those of you who don't know, you can't consider anything 3 years or older on the criminal background check as material to your decision for an approval or denial. We do see people who committed crimes like when they were teenagers who haven't done anything bad recently and have otherwise are well qualified people. And that's, great. The system works in that case.
All right, love it. Well, thank you, everyone. Special thank you to Colin, Anna, and Tyson, and Nick, I'm sorry, for being included in this conversation. Special thank you to IRS. They're local, they're community oriented. This will be recorded and it will be on the NBOA website. If Jeff has anything else to add, we can sign off.
Nope, that's just thank you for coming. I guess one thing, just trying to sum up a few things from what I heard from what everybody said is that um, the criminals, the fraud that's occurring is coming from crafty and savvy people. A lot of people I hear, they kind of subjectively say, well, they feel like I could trust them, and recognize that the ones that are the biggest danger look the best. They look like just like the best tenants. So I think the takeaway from what I heard from what everybody said is have a process, have a thorough process, a thought out process, and be objective with every applicant that you screen so that you are following all the same steps, like the 5 steps that the Tyson and the apartment source uses, so that you've really found the mistakes. And the biggest thing here is to get the best tenants at the time that you approve them, and avoid getting the ones that are going to be a problem in the future. So, Ari, Tyson, Colin, and Nick, thank you for leading this important discussion. If you have any questions, reach out to each of these people. Their contact information will be available. And in a couple of days, we also will have this up on the NBOA website for you to share with others.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you for your time.